6 months before he penned I Don't Want to Talk About It, Danny Whitten provided backing vocals on Neil Young's Southern Man, a protest song that saw the Canadian folk rocker take aim at the history of slavery and racial injustice in the deep south of the United States. But in the South itself, Ronnie Van Zant balked at Young's broad, condescending, stereotype-driven view of his homeland and gathered his Leonard Skinner bandmates to record a riposte that would far outshine Young's original Barb and become one of the most recognisable rock songs of all time. And while there may have been no Alabama, it was sweet home for Raith Rovers yesterday. Dougie Imrie and his players put their troubles on the road to one side and returned to winning ways with a 3-1 win over Airdrie, despite falling behind in the 54th minute. An equaliser from Innes Cameron got the Rovers back on track before a brace from Kai Montagu put the game beyond the diamonds and gave the Rovers a little bit of breathing space in the battle to avoid relegation. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. I am Duncan Cameron, and with me tonight we have a helping of double trouble. First of all, they call him the Breeze. It's Leslie Mabon. Les, how are you?
Very good to be back. I've been away for an extended period in Japan, in the Far East, and in Indonesia. In Japan, seeing my family. So while I was away for 6 weeks. I watched every single league game live on Wraith TV, up past midnight every single time. Did not see a single goal in the whole time I was away. There's a lot of sleep missed, not a single goal. I didn't stay up for the Challenge Cup game, but didn't see a single goal, so I was absolutely delighted to be back home and to see 3 in the space of a single afternoon yesterday.
I don't know if that's better or worse than those of us who went to those games and saw them. I suppose we at least did it in daylight hours for the most part. And also tonight, he's a simple man. It's Robbie Weir. How are you, Robbie?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm excellent. Much like Mrs. Munro, just glad to be home in Kirkcaldy, I guess. Yes, it was good to see guns out for Kai Montagu yesterday. Strapping young man, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a little while.
Yes, I suspect he may be a recurring theme across the course of this episode. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think we were all expecting changes to the starting lineup here. Certainly, I think so. Most of us were calling out for them, and we did. We got 4 of them. So, as I think we knew, Innes Cameron came in to replace the injured Jack Hamilton. Andy Winter took over for Josh Mullen on the right-hand side. And Ross Matthews came in for Jay Rowe, which sent Jordan Doherty back to right-back. And then fourth and finally, Callum Fordyce made his long-awaited return from injury to replace Dara O'Connor at centre-back next to Paul Hanlon. Robbie, I think the last of those is the most kind of eye-catching. Given the general defensive record up to this point, can Dara O'Connor feel a little bit hard done by to be dropping out there?
Maybe, but at the same time, I think that something did need to change on that front, because we've spoken about it a lot, how the defensive record has been the sort of shining light of this season, but it'll only last you for so long if you're not scoring goals up the other end. I was very happy to see Callum Fordyce come back in. I've been asking for it for a good wee while. And it was literally within the first 30 seconds of that game that we saw the benefit of it. Just the composure to sort of be able to get ourselves on the ball, and his experience and willingness to sort of pick passes throughout the game, which just made us look like a different team. So I'm sure Darryl O'Connor probably does feel a bit aggrieved, but it was a great introduction, a reintroduction, I should say, for Callum Fordyce back into the sort of starting 11.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Darryl O'Connor, if you were judging him on the very sort of first and foremost aspects of his job, I don't think there's a huge amount of criticism to be found there. I think in terms of the heading and the tackling and the positioning of a kind of core defending as a centre-half. Obviously, I know we lost 3 goals at Dunfermline, but, broadly speaking, defensive record has still been really good. But once you go beyond that, I think you're right. I think that's where Callum Fordyce starts to give you a little bit more. And you're absolutely right. We did see it, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. Les, as you say, it's been a good few weeks since we had the sort of benefit of your opinions. So over that period, you've been traversing the Far East and various other places across the globe. What have you been calling out for change-wise, and how much of it did you see going into yesterday?
I think the fact that we won yesterday probably tempers some of the things that I would otherwise have said. So, I mean, there's stuff that I can maybe keep for future episodes. I'm sure we can bring that out the fridge as and when we need. However, I think it's probably fair to say that there were players that I think needed taken out the team for their benefit as much as for ours. And whether the manager was wanting to just keep things as they were and see how they panned out, or whether we'd reached a natural point where those changes had to be made, I don't know. As you were just saying, I mean, O'Connor is the most obvious one. Not really necessarily defensively, he can feel that aggrieved, but with regard to the delivery and the forward play, certainly, yeah, Forday's coming in. Also, most notably up top as well, where Jack Hamilton has, with a few exceptions, struggled, and I think taking him out the final, I mean, even we've said it so many times ourselves that for whatever reason we just seem to play better when he's off the pitch. And the fact that he's got injured is probably not a good thing for him. But it's a natural point at which to take him out the team and give Innes Cameron, who's now probably hopefully up to fitness, a crack of the whip. Midfield as well is a challenging one. Scott Brown is blowing hot and cold this season. He is the captain, which I do think does play a part in not dropping him. I've been of the view that he's maybe needed a rest now and again, and every time I've said that, he's come back and proved me wrong by playing out his skin in the next game. But that's one where, again, we've now got an enforced absence there, and it has forced Dougie Imrie to do things maybe a wee bit differently. Lastly as well, so again, right back, I mean, J. Rowe's not been terrible. I mean, he's not brilliant. The fact that there was a big hole for Callum Morrison to go into last week kind of suggests he's not perfect. But, you know, again, he's been broadly okay in that we haven't been talking about him every week. But again, it's one of these ones there with Jordan Docherty, where Docherty is just giving you that bit more. He's giving you that bit more game intelligence. He's giving you that bit more control. He's giving you that bit more quality getting forward. Again, that's something we'll no doubt talk about. And I mean, I was thinking before the game started, so one of the few things that we've actually had success from this season has been balls into the box from Jordan Docherty from the right, and also Josh Millen as well. So for that reason alone, I think I was really glad to see Docherty go back in at right back, Fordyce coming into the defence, just to give us that quality and that control that's maybe been lacking the last couple of weeks, and also just getting Jack Hamilton out of there for his benefit as much as ours. So, yeah, I mean, the team that came out, I think they were changes that I think if you asked 80-90% of Rovers fans, would probably all have been happy with those, I would have thought.
Just to come in there, one that I would mention as well, maybe a bit bold to bring in Andy Winter from Dougie Imrie as that sort of wide player. I think that 2 o'clock a lot of people were sort of questioning his inclusion and commenting to suggest that he'd not really done too much up to this point. And I know that we'll talk about the performance overall, and that he was on the pitch for an hour, involved in a couple of big moments, one of which didn't really go his way, which we'll come to. But again, the sort of first major chance that we really get is off the back of his crossing for Lewis Vaughan. Thought it was a bit more assured from Andy Winter than maybe we've seen previously in the past. How much of that is down to maybe Airdrie and sort of the level that they're at the moment. But I felt that, yeah, nice and aggressive from our sort of, from 5-6 players going forward with the ball yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, without being too sort of critical or going over old ground, I do think that if you're looking at that Dunfermline performance and you're deciding, like, right, I need to make some changes, Josh Mullen didn't do a huge amount in that game to keep himself away from the top end of that list, if I could be as diplomatic as that. And I think you're then really looking at, well, who's going in there? Is it Richard Chin, or is it Andy Winter? And I think we've all seen up to this point Richard Chin's just that wee bit further away for whatever reason. I have been chief among the sort of winter sceptics, if you want to call us that. And I thought he was actually really good yesterday. I thought that was by far probably his best game in Rovers jersey. He was involved. He was doing things. And as you say, we'll talk about the one where he does a thing that doesn't go brilliantly, but he's still there. He's involved, and it's an interesting point. I want to come back to an element of it later on, of the Winter versus Chin of it all. But again, a really encouraging sign. And as you say, is there an element you need to temper it because it's Airdrie? But in his time with us, Andy Winter's played Airdrie twice already, and not had a huge amount of impact. He made his debut there, and so I think at least even compared against his own standards, I think that was a strong performance. Now we wouldn't normally, generally in this podcast, talk about the very first seconds of a game, but Robbie, you already alluded to it. A slight difference in approach here, in as much as rather than sort of kicking for touch, there was a couple of little slick passes straight from kick-off, and then it leads to a free kick about 25 yards out. But presumably, Robbie, based on what you've already said, you saw that as a promising sign, a good omen for what was to come in terms of the Rovers' approach to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the composure to sort of play the ball about a bit more. I think as a football fan, you take a very different attitude to kick-offs compared to maybe coaches and managers and players do, which is, okay, if we can get further down the pitch, then we can maybe hem them into a corner and then try and build from there. Whereas as fans, you want to see your team getting on the ball and to show a bit of composure and play it. But that's exactly what Rovers did to kick it off yesterday. Just looked a lot more enthusiastic and a lot more willing to drive forward, and yeah, rightfully so. Like, we win a free kick, nothing comes of it, but it gives us a good sort of indication of the way that we're going to be playing throughout the afternoon. That it wasn't going to be an afternoon where we were not looking to do anything. There's been plenty of criticism in terms of the sort of passing and the build-up or lack of from this team, particularly over since that Queen's Park came back in January. And really good way for them to address that just by doing what they did right from the kickoff yesterday. So it's great to see.
I took it as a signal of intent, more than anything else. I'm absolutely certain if you go to the Premier League and their 30-strong backroom staff, there'll be some insufferable nerd in there who tells you that if you do kick off a certain way, you get a 0.4% improved chance of doing something else.
It's called Mikel Arteta,
but generally speaking, I'm pretty sure it's a fairly low impact thing. There's literally the entire game to come after it. So as I say, it was a signal of intent as much as anything. Just like a big beacon to send up to go. We're going to try and play some passes today, and obviously the selection of Callum Fordyce, I think, helped that as well. And I think it was something that was appreciated, I suppose. I don't know. It felt like there was a bit more, maybe I'm just a pessimist, but a bit more kind of patience in the stand than I was expecting. And even like early doors, there were a couple of passes that went along the back line, and there was a wee bit of kind of mumping and moaning. But even at that, it seemed like when it was making its way to Callum Fordyce and then he was kind of zipping passes into Vaughan's feet as much as anything, it did seem like there was a little bit more of kind of an acceptance, a little bit more of a recognition of like, we're trying something different. So, we've still got to wait and see whether it pays off, and there were some bumps in the road. But I think that, we've obviously all been calling out for a change in approach. And as I said, I think that was kind of evident from the beginning. Robbie, as you say, from the kind of first chance it comes from, it's good work from Andy Winter on the right-hand side. And he squares across for Lewis Vaughan, who hits the post. Now, at the time, I didn't realise that's what happened there. It looked like, just I think because of the angle that he's at from the other end, I thought he was hitting it sort of comfortably wide, and then it must have been blocked. It's just one of these where I just didn't have a good view of what had happened. But Les, with the obvious qualifier that this doesn't actually go in, but does the chance in and of itself to demonstrate the value of having someone like Lewis Vaughan as your number 10 in that system?
Oh, it definitely does. The fact that he's in the box and he's probably our top, well, definitely is one of our top goal scorers over the last few seasons. One thing I would say, and that was something that became apparent as the afternoon wore on, he had a lot of time without any player in a diamond shirt making any sort of effort to close him down. He did have a lot of time to kind of turn around, retrieve the ball, and then get a shot away. But this is what the value of Vaughan in the box is he will find that half a yard or whatever, and he will get the shots away. As an aside, it's why I'm really not a fan of Lewis Vaughan being on corners, and I'm very glad that didn't happen yesterday, because you're taking the guy that's actually got the skills and the clinical finishing out the box. So just as an aside, that's something that is a bee in my bonnet, is Lewis Vaughan taking corners, because you're taking the boy with that ability out of the box. But no, having him in there, definitely. I thought Vaughan started really well yesterday. He was well up for it. And much like Paul Niso behind him, he was trying to get the ball forwards when he had it. Very unfortunate that didn't go in. I mean, I was watching on Wraith TV, and it actually did just roll and then hit the post, very, very close to going in. And I think if that had gone in, it could have been a very different afternoon. But no, definitely, I think, as he says, well, credit to Winter playing a very calm ball in. The temptation, if you've been out the team for a few weeks, so you've certainly not been playing in that position, would just be to build a cross in at Big Ennis's head. But actually, just to take that moment and then just to see Vaughan there and roll something on the deck in his direction, that's a level of composure that's good to see as well.
This is a fairly rare occasion in that there are enough chances in this first half that I'm going to have to skip over a couple of them, which doesn't happen all too often. But the next one I want to touch on just briefly, Robbie, is the chance from a corner. I mean, a good few chances from corners. Two of the goals come from corners. But this first one is Innes Cameron at the back post. And he sort of heads it back across the goal, and then it's Andy Winter who has his shot sort of headed off the line-ish. I think it would be the way to put that. Looking at back on the highlights, though, could Innes Cameron maybe just nod this into the goal?
Quite possibly. I've got it up here. It's a valid question. He does well to sort of lose his marker, and we see that. It's almost like when you
he's decided
back,
really early.
Quite easy to
he's decided really early. Like, I'm going to get behind this, and I'm going to head it back down to someone. And then actually, when you watch it back, if he just sort of
well, it's safe to say that for Big Ennis, he learned his lesson in the second half. So we'll give him his credit about getting behind the ball later on. But yeah, I just to go over Innes Cameron's performance overall, though, I thought that he looked really commanding. I've seen a few comments about sort of his touch not being the best, maybe, online. I actually thought it was brilliant. I thought it was fantastic fun to watch. Because he was just great at sort of getting that extra sort of half yard of space, and even if he did take heavy touches at points, it was still leading to things, and it was being progressive. His attitude was absolutely phenomenal. He never gave up on any lost causes. There wasn't any sort of why we doing this or what's going on with it. I think he's really cemented himself now, probably in the eyes of supporters, as the player that we're looking for number 9 for the rest of the season. Fitness wise, again, that's going to be a different question, because by the end of the game, he looked absolutely knackered. So I hope they had him in a cryo chamber down at Gym 64 or something like that, if they've got them there now. But overall, yeah, just really, really impressive performance from him. And yeah, I suppose he was one of two players that probably potentially you could look back and you're like, you probably could have had a hat-trick on the day, given the chances. But it's good to see us getting to those points where we are creating chances, because I know it's been a frustration of everyone that we've just not been scoring goals, and it's one of these depressing statistics that gets chucked about that we've not scored since January in the league. That's well and truly buried now, which is great. I'm glad that we don't need to talk about that anymore.
Oh, you say that. We've still got a bit of this game to get through first.
Yeah, true.
Because I do have at least one more, possibly two, chances to cover on this. The other one, so probably I've got it down here as maybe the best chance of the half. And actually, this one, slightly ironically, based on what we've been saying, it comes from just a big ball up from the back. But again, I think it's the benefit of being able to mix it a little bit. And really, I think it comes from the midfielder, I suppose, misjudges the ball in the air. But then Dylan Easton just sort of knocks it into the path of Lewis Vaughan. Potentially brings it down with his arm, but doesn't know an awful lot about it. But certainly doesn't give that a second thought. Runs on, beats his man, slips in his Cameron, who then has a shot well saved by Harry Stone. Les, I suppose a kind of two-part question, this one. First of all, were you surprised / disappointed to see Lewis Vaughan play this in rather than taking it on himself? And secondly, does Innes Cameron do anything wrong here, or is that just good goalkeeping?
I was, first of all, very surprised and, amazed to see Lewis Vaughan not taking the shot on himself. He's clearly learnt something, or he's clearly been told something by the manager, because, the Lewis Vaughan of old would have taken the shot. It's an improvement from the Lewis Vaughan of a few months ago who would have tried to win a penalty. So let's be grateful for that. But no, it's good decision making, and again, like you were saying earlier, reflective of the patience that we were showing that is maybe more than I would have given the team credit for. On Innes, one thing that I think is really good about Innes Cameron compared to Jack Hamilton is he shoots, and he is not afraid to shoot, and it doesn't always go on target. There's a reason he's playing at this level. There's a reason he was not in the team where he was before, but he's not afraid to shoot. We saw it last week at East End Park. Again, got a shot away. Maybe not as good a shot as he would have wanted. East End Park, he did hit it straight at the keeper. Yesterday as well, that shot did go straight in the direction of the keeper. In fairness, it was a good save. You could tell by the reaction of the Airdrie fans who were applauding quite vociferously. They clearly thought it was a good save from Clark as well. The thing with centre forwards with us is the bar is very low. The bar is so low that archaeologists have discovered it and have mistaken it for Roman plumbing. Nonetheless, to see a centre forward actually showing for the ball, getting into space and getting the shots away by virtue of percentages of nothing else, if he keeps doing that, we're going to get some of those coming off, as we found out later. But to answer your original question, quite surprised to see Louis Vaughan passing, but actually very pleased to see that happening as well, and to see that bit of patience and the kind of recognition that if we kept plugging away, something would happen.
Yeah, for me, the thing with this is that, Innes Cameron, he's on his weaker foot, but what he does is he sorts his feet out really well and gets a lot of power behind it. And I think it's yes, he could have gone closer to either post, but actually, as you say, the bar's not particularly high. And the fact that he's just getting a decent shot away there is promising and kind of bodes well, I suppose. Just before we get to half time, Robbie, Ewan Henderson sort of races away from Ross Matthews, and it's a good kind of 50-60 yard sprint before he's denied by Josh Ray, who makes a kind of similarly good stop. This, I think, just a little reminder of Airdrie's threat, particularly given the nature of the goals they scored in the last game at Starks Park.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough one because Ewan Henderson's got a long way to go, but Josh Ray, he's got a long way to get ready for it in a sense, which probably makes it a bit more difficult for him because he's trying to keep track of the man in the centre, and then you've got Henderson. What's going on between the defence in terms of should someone go over to cover, or are we just going to let Henderson get straight through? And I felt that yesterday Josh Ray had a very assured performance. Didn't really see too many mentions of him after the game, but he stepped up when needed in Airdrie. They did have a good number of shots on target across the piece that he sort of handled without any issues. But that moment in particular was sort of a key indicator of it wasn't a game that was ever going to be one team streaming out of sight without any issues, because we were looking up for it, but also Airdrie weren't without their threats.
Now, the halftime whistle goes shortly after that. Lewis Vaughan had been getting some treatment out on the far side. He was sort of up and down a couple of times as he was trying to come away, and then as he left the park and he was in discussion with Dougie Emery, he looked fairly upset. I think that's the biggest thing. As much as he was walking off, he kind of had his jersey over his face at a couple of points. But then he sort of jogged to the last kind of 10 yards to the tunnel. Don't know if you were still kind of keeping an eye on him at this point, Robbie, but
yeah,
that the little jog, as I say, certainly I found that quite kind of heartening. And we've since found out. So Dougie Emery says it's post match that he'd only trained the one day because he was struggling with a kind of an ankle. He'd rolled his ankle previously, and it was the same thing again. So I suppose, with the benefit of hindsight, it's not quite as precarious as it might have been. But were you pretty concerned at that point?
Yeah, I mean, the concern's twofold. Firstly, it's for Lewis Vaughan's well-being, because he's a very, very good player. And we saw in the first half with the chance off the post that he can get into those positions. And I think any team in this league would be weaker if they didn't have a player of Lewis Vaughan's calibre in their lineup. But also as well, I think if you're being really open and transparent, you would also say there's a concern about who's going to replace him if he does come off. And the options that we do have, I mean, we're already missing Jack Hamilton. So other than that, we've not sort of got an out-and-out forward to replace him with. So you're really looking at Kai Montagu, he's had a degree of exposure with full-time football, but we'll come on to that in a bit as to the impact that he has. Or you're looking at bringing Easton centrally and then putting on one of Mullen or Chin and going down that route. But I mean, the preference would be a fit Lewis Vaughan. So we didn't get that for the second half. The subs are made. Dougie Emery was very quickly over to sort of check on him as they were going off the pitch. And I do think it was a very telling indicator that he did that sort of jog to show, like, yeah, this isn't as potentially as serious as sort of people might make out. I just want to make a point here that, yes, no tears or anything of that nature.
That's it. That's just, I think, what you're seeing is kind of pure sort of competitive spirit.
Yeah.
He's just incredibly annoyed and probably borderline upset that he's having to come off at all. And I wonder if how much of that was actually like, oh, hang on a second, there's 2,500 people here who are actually really worried. I might just need to just like take this down from a 3-alarm fire, even if I am going to have to go off. So yes, hopefully that's a fairly minor one, as you say. Very, very, very important player, and we could do them back as quickly as possible. But to stick with the game, Airdrie, I thought, started the second half kind of fairly brightly. I don't know if maybe that was just even that they'd taken a little bit of heart from it. But the first big chance, Robbie, you've mentioned it already, falls for Andy Winter. Good build-up play from the Rovers. Lewis Stevenson cuts the ball back, and Andy Winter's kind of 10 yards out running onto it, but just opens his body, opens his foot up a little bit too much, and lets the ball slip wide of the far post. Les, should he be doing better there?
Probably yes, given that he's in front of the goal, and it's a position where it should be easier to score than to miss. Now, given the issues that we had with Wilfred Nancy earlier in the season, I don't think anybody who's not played football at that level should be instructing a player on how to move their body to receive a ball. However, as I say, given his positioning, let's be very charitable and say he was trying to just put it as close to the post as possible to minimise the chance of the goalkeeper getting it. But that's a point where you're just thinking, oh God, we're not going to score this afternoon. You think, okay, so Innes has hit the ball straight at the keeper. Vaughan's had hit the post as well. Now we've had somebody else missing from I don't want to say effectively point blank range. You're kind of thinking, we're not going to score this afternoon. just, oh my goodness. I mean, Andy Winter, I have to say, I think he's one of these players I'd be really delighted if he gets a goal in the next couple of games, because I think it could just settle him down and he could just kick on from there. The kind of player, if he's able to get a goal, even if it's just, like a tap in or whatever, get a goal, and then I think we could maybe see him just build a bit of confidence and just kick on. It was a shame it didn't come yesterday, but I think if he keeps plugging away, I think it will come sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's good movement in this, both from Andy Winter, also from Minnis Cameron as well. Like, it takes the defender away, creates the space, and actually, I think the thing always with these is your immediate thought is like, could he have just gone with his other foot? And actually, I think the almost like the sort of default stance would be actually if he goes out with his left, he's almost more likely to drag it across the goal. And it's the fact that he opens himself up so much that it runs across. So, yes, unfortunate. Where he is slightly fortunate is I don't think it goes down as the miss of the afternoon. So he gets away with that as well. But, yes, that's still to come, because at this point, there is a cat amongst the pigeons. Airdrie take the lead in the 54th minute. It's really good build-up play, this. It's, I don't want to be overly kind of critical of Airdrie, but I think probably fair to say that they didn't have a huge number of really kind of good bits of football over the course of the afternoon. But this undeniably is. There's just 2 or 3 little quick passes in quick succession that really create this whole move. And it's really complemented by Ewan Henderson, who is sort of playing out wide left, but he drags Jordan Doherty right into the middle of the park. That creates a huge amount of space for Adam Devine. And even at that, when the ball comes to Ewan Henderson here, and he's only got one option, he needs to just play in Adam Devine. I think if he just kind of snatches at it, he's going to end up putting it behind him, and he just takes a little half second and shifts his body slightly so that he plays in perfectly. It was a really, really good kind of supporting attacking play, and it gives Devine absolutely no choice. All he can do is just hit it as well as he can, and it's a lesson in hitting the ball as hard as you can, because it takes a deflection off Callum Fordyce, which puts it past Josh Ray in the Rovers' goal. Robbie, keen to hear your thoughts on the goal, both in terms of the actual goal itself, but also your mental state in the immediate aftermath of the goal.
Yeah, so with the goal itself, when you watch the highlights back, I'd initially looked at Doherty moving centrally, but you're right, he's pulled in by Henderson, and then you see Winter trying to bomb back as quickly as possible. So I'm going to guess he's been the missing man in this equation as to what's happened, and if you're attributing blame, etc. Quite fortuitous, I mean, for Devine, that it does take that deflection off of Fordyce, but there was always going to be that danger. How would I describe my mentality at that point, you ask? Fragile, shall we say, is how I would describe myself. You feel like you're staring down the barrel of a gun. I can't imagine how the players felt, but certainly you do worry within the South Stand that there's going to be a degree of venom, shall we say, given their performances recently and just how things haven't panned out. And it was a thoroughly rotten 10 minutes that followed it, and the worry is Airdrie sort of dominated the ball, I would say, for the most part. There was obviously a reasonably decent chance in there, but yeah, just that worry that the chatter's all going to be about just off bottom one goal difference. Ross County are beating Dunfermline, and at that point as well. I mean, Queen's Park are losing to Arbroath as well. Then you've got the other game is Morton beating Ayr. So it was not looking pretty at that point in terms of the league table. Fortunately, things can change.
Yeah, Les, for you at this point, are you looking at that and thinking, here we go again, this is a collapse, this is a calamity? Or are you thinking, we've been the better side, it's only one goal, there's plenty of time left to go? Where were you at immediate point?
You can probably guess. Possibly the only person even remotely close to as pessimistic as Scott on the podcast. But no, just to back that up with some numbers. So the last time we came from behind to win a league game was last season at Falkirk, clearly at Grangemouth, when we scored 3 goals at the end of the game, won 3-1. The last time we came from behind to win at home was in 2023. We beat Partick Thistle 4-3, having gone ahead. The last time we won in the league at home, when the opposition scored first, November 2021 against Morton. Dougie Imrie wasn't even Morton manager at that point. He hadn't even started his managerial career. That's how long it's been. 4.5 seasons. Unless I've missed something really obvious. 4.5 seasons since we had won a game at Starks Park when the opposition had scored first. So, I don't want to condone or encourage gambling, but sometimes you see in-play odds and it goes out to a team winning and 30-1 or whatever, and you think, that's ridiculous, those are very charitable odds, it's the championship. Then you see stuff like that, and you think, actually, no. And the chances of us coming back from this are pretty slim. And I think my big concern at that point, and again, I suspect I would not have been alone in this concern, was thinking, I don't think the players have got the fight to get back into this. You could see very easily, you could have a situation where we just don't have the fight, or the fear and the panic sets in, and we resort to just trying to shell balls up to Ennis Cameron in the hope that something sticks. So I was not optimistic at that point at all.
See what I would say to that, Les. It was interesting to be in the South Stand yesterday. Duncan, you sort of alluded to this earlier on, but when we went 1-0 down, I think that the players did get a slight degree of leeway given how many chances that we'd sort of created. There was naturally people are going to be worried because we're in that position and our form hasn't been great. And how many games have we seen where we've gone a goal behind and then the opposition just shuts up shop and we don't get back into it? But I think because we had created so many chances, there was sort of, I feel like during the week, the club, it was almost like the club have internally decided, we need to have a hard reset here. They do a 17-minute interview with Davy Hancock sitting down with Dougie Imrie, talking about the sort of covering a lot of ground that they'd already covered post Dunfermline, but saying, right, we're a wee bit cooler heads now, let's talk about it. There's naturally going to be sort of some frustrated voices when we're trying to play out from the back and people are saying, get up the pitch when we're 1-0 down. But there was also this sort of, we'd get the ball forward and people in the South Stand were like, right, come on, let's get behind the team, let's go. And there was a group up the back that were sort of getting on their feet and sort of giving the team their backing. Not seen that in a long time from the back of the stand, which was great, fantastic. We need that. I'm sure that makes a big difference to those. But it just felt there was a degree of sort of togetherness, even though the odds were against us, even though that we've been performing poorly, did feel a bit more sort of unity there rather than sort of a lot of venom at that point.
Yeah, definitely. Just as a brief aside, that 17-minute interview, I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
And also,
yeah.
We spoke about it after the Dunfermline game in terms of, you get beaten at Derby, there's not really anything you can say in an interview that's going to make it okay or anything like that. And we also spoke about the fact that Barry Robson's interviews get very short shrift, I think, amongst the kind of wider support. But it makes a difference because, like Dougie Imrie, I see, that pops up. I'd just driven back to the road for Peterhead and looked at my phone and it's like, oh, there's a 17-minute interview with Dougie Imrie. And my first thought was, I'm looking forward to listening to that. That should be quite good. And I think it says something about Dougie Imrie as a communicator, I suppose, to use a slight kind of businessy buzzword. He speaks well, and it's interesting. He's a someone that I want to listen to. And yeah, we've just lost a load of games, but I'm still keen to hear what his thoughts are on it and what he is doing about it. And it's not because I didn't come away from that interview well, like, oh, there's 7 things I didn't know before I listened to it. Not like, wow, there's something that I've never thought about that in that way before. It's just very engaging, and it's it makes a difference. It does. There's just no getting away from it. But what also made a difference in this game was a substitution on the hour mark. Richard Chin. Again, those of you who are normal podcast people who are just listening will not have the benefit of Les is very resplendent in what I believe is a Richard Chin Malaysia jersey, and it was indeed Richard Chin who came on for Andy Winter. Now, we mentioned already about Andy Winter not by any means at all one of his poorer performances. I think possibly his best. But Les, do you think that was bear in mind that Kai Montagu was already on the park, introducing Richard Chin as well, a defining moment in the pattern of the rest of this game?
I think it was. And I mean, I did kind of fear the worst for Richard Chin a couple of weeks ago. I think my thinking had been that after the World Cup Willie incident and then after the Challenge Cup, when we'd seen him lose his man and lead to us losing the goal, that effectively Imrie just didn't fancy him and he was going to be told he was surplus to requirements. But he's played his way back into the team, and for whatever's happened, he's found his way back in. I mean, as we were talking at the start, I suspect one of the reasons we're not seeing Richard Chin starting is defensively he's not that strong. I mean, it doesn't help that he is wee. I mean, he's a wee guy, and that's always going to go against you when you're trying to defend things. And there's this just basic physics. It's like when we used to play fives. I was at my last workplace, and we had the press officer who was 6'8", and I'm trying to track him down. People are screaming at me, "Don't let it bounce!" And I'm thinking, how am I supposed to do that? I'm 5'6". So I mean, there's that element. And I think that does work against Richard Chin, but you can understand maybe from that point of view why there's been a bit of apprehension, and there is a catalogue of issues where we've had issues with Chin losing his man defensively. But if you're losing a game, he's a box of tricks. I mean, he's an absolute box of tricks. He will try things. They don't always work, but he will try things. He'll get in and about people. He's got a very, very low centre of gravity. He'll go one way and the next. He'll try and find people. You might as well roll the dice. I mean, he's been good at home. A lot of games, especially games we've had at home. He scored against Arbroath. He came on unlucky not to score when he came back from injury in the Ross County game. So it's a gamble that you think would be worth taking. And it's a point that, again, we'll come on to this in a moment. There's a number of players there, some of our youngest players, all stepped up to the plate yesterday. We needed them to do that, and they all stepped up and delivered when we needed them to. I think, hopefully, that's something that we can point to for the rest of the season. And for Richard Chin as well. Sometimes you just maybe need a good performance or getting something right, trying something and having that come off and go in your favour, and then just be able to push on from there. So, yeah, definitely a defining moment that World Cup Willie coming on and coming good.
It just changed the whole dynamic of that midfield. So having Montagu and Chin on there, there was just more mobility, more kind of running the ball, chasing the channels, but just forcing Airdrie to be much more on their toes to try and defend it. And then that, in turn, meant there was more space then for Paul Niso to run into as well. We haven't mentioned them yet. That is almost just like something we're keeping in our pocket, because he absolutely deserves a lot of conversation that we will get to.
You just interjected. I would also say it's exactly the same for Jordan Doherty. Him going forward. As soon as Chin came on, you see a lot more of him going down that right-hand side.
Jordan Doherty's got such an intriguing kind of technique for putting a cross in. It's the most kind of lackadaisical but effective way that,
like a dink.
He looks like someone is just sort of like tidying up dog toys and just kind of like kicking them closer to where the basket is. Just like kind of flicks his foot at the ball and somehow gets all that kind of whip and swerve on it. It's intriguing. I'm not quite sure how he does it, but it's very effective. And you're absolutely right. just creates so much more room for everybody to work in. And the other thing, just on Richard Chin, what we're talking about, he's so tenacious as well. Because I think that's the thing is, when you've not seen him for a while, you're always going to remember the kind of trickiness and the pace and all that kind of stuff. But actually, just watching him off the bench on Saturday there and watching him the week before at Dunfermline, there's a couple of times when he's kind of running the ball down into the channel and he maybe just doesn't quite come away with it. You know, the defence nick it off him. He's right there. He's right back on the defender. It's not one of these where the defender takes it off him and then has time to just shell it up the line. He's twice, as he once in each game, where he's basically been, I think, in this game he was sort of dispossessed. In the Dunfermline game, I think he just kind of overran it himself. But just through sheer tenacity, actually then won it back again. It's a real, it's a good attribute to have, and it's something that will stand them in good stead. But let's get into the good stuff. So 64 minutes, so 10 minutes, which, as you say, Robbie, 10 minutes were Airdrie by far and away their best spell in the game. That their tails were really up on the back of the goal, but the equaliser comes from a corner. Callum Fordyce is the most unmarked anyone has ever been as he heads Dylan Easton's corner across the box to the second most unmarked man, and it's Cameron who's there to fire home at the back post. But before we do talk about the kind of positive Rovers aspect of this, Les, talk to me about the defending on show from Airdrie.
I'm really glad this was not us. I'm just really glad this was not us, because I think I would have been throwing projectiles, and if I'd been overseas, I would have been deported for inciting violence. And I don't know how that happens. I mean, I know that this gets less relevant over time as players, managers change and institutional memory gets forgotten. This was a guy who was part of a very successful Airdrie team that got to the playoffs, doing exactly that week in, week out a couple of seasons ago. And I mean, I don't know
the guy who did their set pieces.
Exactly.
He was the set piece guy.
Exactly. He was their set piece coach, yeah. And he's... I mean, I think the only thing I can kind of think of that's remotely similar was that game where Falkirk won the league by beating us in November last year 3-0. And our game man ran, and you screenshotted it and put it to the group chat, Duncan, with the phrase, "Has this bleep got a force field round him?" And it's exactly the same thing. You have Fordyce is standing there in the box, the ball coming in, and there's nobody within about 2 metres of him. And I don't know who was supposed to be marking him. I saw an Airdrie fan on Twitter suggesting it was McGinty who should have been on him, or McGinty was at least yelling at who should have been on him. But you've given the guy the freedom of the Kingdom of Fife, one of the best headers of a ball of a centre-back in the league, to have a free header on goal. Mind-boggling.
Looking at it back, it genuinely looks like 3 people are marking Richard Chin, which is absolutely hysterical, by the way. Absolute. Chinny's just running about, enjoying himself.
It's a little bit like that big, massive 40-minute complaint I had about the first goal we lost at East End Park. It was like, well, surely if you've left Robbie Fraser in that much space, at least you'll have pressed in on Callum Morrison. It's a little bit like this, where it's like, well, if nobody's marking Callum Fordyce, there must at least be a spare man to pick up Innes Cameron at the back. Nope, not also just there by himself. But yes, doesn't panic and finishes well.
To give him his flowers, so to speak, for Big Innes, I'd sort of said with intent that he was going to get a double in front of the South Stand. And I also said that to Sandy, who sits behind me. So immediately we were celebrating each other, and he's like, "Oh, you might be on." I thought it was a really good finish from Innes Cameron, because the ball's almost like it's exactly the type of sort of one, and we saw it earlier on this season, that game against Queen's Park at home where Jack Hamilton got his hat-trick, where there was a chance that got sort of stuck under his feet, and you're thinking, oh no, it's just like needs to be doing better there. Whereas Innes Cameron, you mentioned the one in the first half where he could have headed it in, and you only realise looking back. Whereas with this one, it's like he almost kind of steps back to be able to take the shot and get it away from himself. Lovely stuff. And it was from there. It was like he just was like, aye, right, got a goal, fine, let's go, let's kick on. And it was at the heart of sort of everything going forward for a lot of it.
Yeah, he's certainly at the heart of the next big moment in this one. I think quite possibly could have had a goal for himself, could have had the double that you were looking for. It's a Jordan Doherty special as he sort of clips the cross in, meets, or it's met by Innes Cameron at the back post, who, for right now, I'm going to say knocks it down for Kai Montagu, who then manages to fire it over the bar from 6 yards out. Robbie, we'll come to the miss in a second, but first of all, is this a blatant penalty kick?
Yeah, I would potentially argue it. I thought actually the referee had a good game, and right now there's a lot of Airdrie fans that might be listening to this who are balking at that, saying, how can you say that? Rovers didn't classes, etc. But my team won and your team lost, so I don't really care. But yeah, I did think that, like, with the opportunity that came up after, Montagu, obviously you think he's going to bury it, but even before that, because he doesn't bury it, should it get hauled back for a penalty?
Yes.
And
yes, it should. Sorry, I know that was a rhetorical question, but that is a penalty kick and a red card. Like, the boy's got no intention of playing the ball, shoves Innes Cameron in the back. Innes Cameron is 2 yards away from the goal. There's a very reasonable chance, I would say an obvious chance, that he might score a goal there if he's not shoved in the back. And the only thing that surprised me more than the referee not giving it was how little claim there was from the other Rovers players other than Innes Cameron, who was like, hang on a second, that's a penalty kick. Sorry, I interrupted you there. But
no, it's absolutely fine.
You might argue it. I would vehemently argue that is a blatant penalty.
Clearly there. I'm glad that you've taken the opportunity to get that off your chest, Duncan. Yeah, that was a recurring theme, people not arguing for stuff, because Airdrie's rather salty Twitter admin with the second goal as well, coming up that it was a handball that none of their players appealed for. But yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But yes, it then makes its way to Kai Montagu, who, yeah, probably should have came away with a hat-trick yesterday, which I don't think I would have ever expected. But we are moving forward.
Yeah, well, let's in fact, I tell you what, we'll barely mention that miss from Kai Montagu. I don't care. So we'll skip straight to the next goal. This one, again, it's another Dylan Easton corner. It's kind of headed into an unsuspecting Callum Fordyce. But this time when it comes down, Kai Montagu makes no mistake. He takes a good touch, actually. And then it's a very tricky angle, but he still manages to fire it in via the underside of the bar. Les, as Robbie mentioned, the Airdrie, Twitter, as much as anything, looking for a handball for this one. Do you reckon there's a claim there?
I've watched the replays back on Race TV multiple times today. I can't see anything either way that's conclusive. From the various angles that have been available to me, I can't see anything that concludes either way. The ball does come in. The ball does make contact with part of Fordyce. I am not sure whether it's his arm, whether it's his shoulder, whether it bounces off him, whether he goes to it. The ball does come in and it does change direction. But I can't conclude what it is. And I've tried all the stuff of like zooming in and things like that. I cannot see either way what it is. I would stand by what I say anytime a VAR type decision might come up, though, which is that if it takes you 10 minutes and you still can't get a conclusive answer, it's not clear and obvious. And on that point of view, play on, let's play ball, goal. I don't know. I didn't see anything, but if it's not that clear and obvious that you couldn't see anything from the angles that are available, it's not a handball for me.
So I think this is a handball.
Yeah,
I think that should have been disallowed. So yeah, on this occasion, I'm going to say with the referee, that's 2 wrongs make a right. So I'm quite happy. Robbie, in terms of the goal itself, as we've just said, Kai Montagu, a couple of minutes before this, kind of guilty of snatching at a chance, really speaks well of him that he manages to do so well with this one.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to say it's infinitely satisfying to see a shot where the ball hits the back of the net twice after cannoning in off the bar. Just there's something about that you think like aesthetically pleasing goal from Kai Montagu there. A lot of the talk before the week about like how Kai Montagu gets used, and sort of the direct comparison for me is I've used a lot is comparing him to Ben Stanley at Partick Thistle, who's a year older than him, went out on loan at Airdrie, came back to Thistle, had a very, very good season this year, Ben Stanley. And I think when you look at him compared to Kai Montagu, you can clearly see that Kai Montagu is quite a raw player, needs a lot more game time, needs a lot more exposure, but we're in a position where we can't really maybe afford it as much. And sometimes these things are born out of necessity. And maybe yesterday was the opportunity for him to sort of seize that necessity and to be able to get in. For quite a little while, I've felt that with Montagu, that it's almost like he's needed a goal to sort of give that affirmation that, yes, he's good for this level, we can use it, he's maybe going to stop snatching at things or trying these sort of... Because I mean, particularly the end of last season we were using him, there was that, what was it, the Airdrie or the Morton game, where he played a very, very aggressive back pass that Josh Ray almost had to sort of scoop away from the line. And at that point you're thinking, so there was a few moments like that, the East Kilbride game earlier on this season. Hopefully that just gives him a bit of confidence and a bit of belief going forward to say, look, I'm here, I've made an impact. Wow, Kai Montagu, we don't win that game yesterday. Stepped up big time. Huge credit to him. And looking forward to seeing how he progresses from here.
It's just that I think prior to this goal, there was a couple of points where he was maybe just being a wee bit more passive, maybe, than you would necessarily like. Just in terms of, I think it was, I said this immediately prior to him scoring his goal, quite rightly, without knowing, threw it back in my face. It was like, you can tell that he was the guy on the park who was the sort of junior member of the squad. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you've got the chance to stick a cross into the box, but Dylan Easton is also next to you, and you're like, I'm just going to give the ball to Dylan Easton to do it. Yeah. And that's not always a bad thing, because if you try that and you're not as good at crossing and you shank it into the stand, then that's a bad choice. But the goal, and then obviously the second goal that we're going to talk about in a second, I think just give him that license that if he does go and just try something himself and it doesn't work, there's much less of an argument for anyone around him. People can't point to it and say, what the hell are you doing that? You never even scored a goal. Scored 2 goals. And the second's an absolute cracker. You just, as you say, it's that kind of affirmation, that giving himself the license to go and puff his chest out a wee bit. And I think to a degree, it's kind of similar to, Les, what you were saying about like Andy Winter. If you can just get a goal, it'll settle him down a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's only in a Rovers context. Whereas for Kai Montagu, it's for his career. So, yeah, but as I say, the thing with that, the first is it's very good, but it's still a little bit like kind of goal-mouthy scramble a little bit, and there's an Alan Partridge thing where he's like, I really need 2 positives, like one to cancel out the negative, and then another one just to have a positive. That's how I felt about these 2 goals, to kind of push us into the Kai Montagu's second goal, where it's like, he's snatched at one from 6 yards and it went over the bar, and then he's dealt with one really well from 6 yards and he's put it in the goal. But they only really kind of cancel each other out. But then when you are kind of leaping onto the end of a cross and bulleting a header past the goalkeeper, that's a positive in and its own right. You're way into the plus points for that one. But yes, to talk about this goal, so it only comes 2 minutes after that, 3-1. We've talked about them already, but it's good. It's hard work by Richard Chin, just kind of bullying a defender. Cuts the ball into the corner, or towards the corner for Jordan Doherty. Again, I have to tell you, if I was critiquing the defending on this, I would be going tonto at the boy who goes after Jordan Doherty here, because it is so half-hearted. But take nothing away, Jordan Doherty, it's a nice little touch just to control the ball, and then puts the cross in for an absolute beauty of a header by Kai Montagu. Les, give me your thoughts on the goal, on Kai Montagu, and anything else you care to share at this time.
Tremendous stuff all round. Again, let's start with Richard Chin. So it would be very easy for Richard Chin, when we were leading 2-1 in an absolutely vital game, given the bollocking he got the last time he tried something ambitious, to look for a safe pass, to play it backwards, to look for somebody else. He doesn't. He heads it effectively round Devine, plays it round Devine, and then plays it round Devine with his foot for Doherty to then whip a lovely cross in for Montagu to head into the goal. I have to say, I've really felt with Kai Montagu. So he was brought in by Ian Murray. He's now on his 4th permanent manager in something like a season and a half of full-time football. That can't be easy. And every manager has talked him up. Every manager has made a point of saying, including Barry Robson, which is quite impressive to actually say a positive thing about another human being. That's quite impressive. But every single manager has talked up Kai Montagu, but every manager has struggled to get game time for him. And every time he's come on, it's been in an emergency. Like the game where Falkirk won the league, Scott Brown went down injured, and he's told basically, right, go on, run about, try and make something happen. That's a big ask. There was the Queen's Park game last year where he came on, we just hung on by our fingernails and he had a nightmare. There was a game where he had the one-on-one, that might be the same game, I can't mind. But he had the one-on-one with the keeper and he just had so much time, he fluffed it. A lot of the time he's been put on, it's been in an emergency situation, or it's been like, okay, we're either cruising or we're getting pumped, we've got 10 minutes to go and run about, get your shorts muddy, try and learn something. So he's had to wait, and he's not had the breaks, I think, to get a proper crack of the whip in the team, and absolutely just stepped up when we needed him to. And I hope that just kind of settles him down a bit and he doesn't feel he's got to get that goal, and he can feel like he's got every right to be there now, and it becomes a part where he becomes not somebody that we have to treat with a kid glove, but actually just somebody that can be a bona fide option if we need to use him. So delighted, absolutely delighted with his performance, delighted for Kai Montagu himself. Also, and just to take things on a slightly different angle, we've gone through all the goals. We've hardly talked about Paul Niso, who was tremendous yesterday, absolutely tremendous. Another young player who was brilliant yesterday. I mean, okay, he's not been perfect. He's had games when he's been off the boil. He has games where things don't come off for him. Paul Niso was superb yesterday, I thought, as well, and I think quite rightly picked up the man of the match. So for a squad that is an old squad, to see some of our youngest players playing so well is quite encouraging. Just the kind of final thing related to that, something I'd said during the Dunfermline game, I think we'd been talking about this, we'd punt all agreed it, but something that had concerned me about the relegation battle had been that I didn't think we had anything we could point to. So Airdrie, like you look at them, they've got nice bits of play. They're not always, things are not coming off. They're nice bits of play. You could look at that. Ross County, you think they've got the players that will get you the results. Morton somehow seemed to be getting results. With us, other than the defence, there wasn't really anything you could point to. Yesterday, that's the first time in 4.5 years we've come from behind at home, having the opposition scoring first to win. We've got young players coming, stepping up, doing things. We're not out the woods by any stretch of the imagination. We're only one bad round of fixtures away from being right back in it. But there's something there that you can point to, hopefully, as a squad and say, look, we can do this. We can get ourselves out of trouble. So I was very, very pleased with how things ended yesterday.
See, just to come in on that point, Les, you mentioned about Morton picking up results. They'd lost their last 4 before they won yesterday. Ayr United, we talk about them. That game will come on to them later in the week, but yeah, they've got a long wait until they play us on Friday. And yeah, just I know that we'd spoken about it before, but sort of the cannibalisation at that bottom half of the league, I still very much believe that. But to take it back even further, just to go on to the Paul Niso of it all, his run at the end, how tremendously fun was that? I was out listening to the podcast that was basically one of the Sky ones with Gareth Bale recently, when he was talking about that game against Inter Milan, where everyone, I think he was saying, like, before the game, Jermaine Genius had been talking about Maicon, like, he's the best right back in the world. And he's like, right, cheers, thanks for that. Now, Airdrie's centre midfielders are by no means the best midfield in the league, let alone the world. But it was great to see Paul Niso just at that run at the end. We're 3-1 up, and he just starts going forward. He takes control of the ball and he runs with it. Now, this is something that we've all asked for ages, just someone to get on the ball and just take it forward. And even right from the start, even with that Lewis Vaughan chance that hits the post, Paul Niso's the one that he basically moves forward with the ball maybe 10, 15 yards, but it's enough to buy space further up the pitch. With this run, though, it was just, like he said, hold on, these guys are absolutely gubbins. And he just runs forward with it. And they're trying to half him. And then he, again, Innes Cameron goes close to filling my dream double. But it wasn't to be. But I was as Les says, rightfully. A lot of resilience from the team. Not out of the woods yet, but very, very positive performance to come back from a goal down to win 3-1 and to sort of lift the spirits of everyone. Much needed. So glad to be walking up the road yesterday with a smile in the sun, feeling a bit better about things.
Yeah, it was like a funny version of last season. It was always Ian was saying, like, Paul Hanlon's always the best player but never wins man of the match. It's like Paul Niso's not in any of the highlights but was the best player on the park. Like, because it was like categorically 100% the man of the match. Like, but as I say, he's not sort of barely in shot for the goals.
Yeah.
But just, I thought he set the tone, which is a really impressive thing for a player his age and who's got, you know, the relatively little amount of football under his belt that he does. But he was brilliant. He was really good. As his second half, I think he benefited from the kind of increased mobility in front of him. He was able to run into that space, knowing that other options would open up. And just brilliant across the board. Absolutely brilliant. I'd say, without a doubt, the man of the match as far as I'm concerned. And I mean, I suppose let's jump straight to Tuesday, but kind of wrap it into just a brief discussion around what yesterday's result does for the league table and the composition of this relegation battle, or whatever you want to call it at this point. So we play Partick Thistle. Partick Thistle, all of a sudden, a very interesting sort of proposition. So they are going into this game trying to get back within sort of 5 points of St Johnstone. This is their game in hand in the kind of title race. But at the same time, in the kind of midst of an injury crisis that, well, I mean, honestly, looks like has ended that title race already. Like, I just can't see, even if they beat us, which is perfectly, you know, possible, I just don't see Thistle having the bodies left to overhaul St Johnstone. They're coming off the back of a kind of last gasp win at Morton, where they played against 10 men for the majority of the game. And then I suppose you'd have to call it sort of a creditable point against St Johnstone at Firhill, but it was very much a point they played for. And as I say, the injuries they've got, I think that's fine. But Robbie, what are you expecting from Thistle? And is it a case of 6 weeks ago, the Partick Thistle that were in place, would this have been a bit of a free hit that now all of a sudden looks like it's a chance to gather more points?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a game against Partick Thistle at home, and that in itself usually means, historically, it's been a very, very favourable fixture for us. But also, conversely, I absolutely despise when we play against teams in injury crisis. Now, you look at who they've got missing: Tony Watt, Ocean Smith, Logan Chalmers, Josh Clark is it the goalkeeper?
Josh Clark's away in international duty.
He's away on international duty. Fraser Taylor and Dan Mackay. But Dan Mackay doesn't really count because he's never made a league appearance in 2 years for Partick Thistle, which is a very, very bizarre situation that for him. A lot of big names in there. This is exactly the type of result where if Thistle win it, you can almost guarantee their fans will say, it can only mean good things for us because we've gone to a place that we've not won in the league since, 2012, 2010 or something like that, with an injury crisis, and the players have stepped up and we've won. I think for Rovers, it's massive opportunity, and hopefully we can get good numbers down in a game much like yesterday, if we can get a relatively positive sort of atmosphere and belief going about the place. Because if we do win, I think in the eyes of the table, it'll be a very big upset. And then all of a sudden, we would go no game in hand, but we would then climb above both Queen's Park, who people were hyping up to the moon as recently as Friday. And Ayr United and Scott Brown's promotion chasing dream. So that would be massive going into next weekend if we can get the win. It'll be a very tough match because Thistle, even though they've got that injury crisis, still a lot of good players in there. I mentioned Ben Stanley already. He's had a fantastic season. Alex Samuels defied expectations in terms of probably the goals that he's got. I think if we'd brought in Alex Samuel in the summer, we would have probably been like, what the hell are we signing him for? But he's done a tremendously good job up top for them, making weight. Aidan Fitzpatrick, look, he's the type of winger that in this league, he's going to blow hot and cold. And you never know if he's on one, he's liable to be a real thorn in your side. And then you've got other players in there like Sosa, etc. Dan O'Reilly's coming back from a suspension, I believe, as well, so he'll be a big return for them. So, yeah, by no means is it an easy game, but by the same token, like, if we go out and we get a win, then everyone starts looking upwards and we start feeling a bit better about things, and hopefully we can get a bit more, because I know the club have been sort of talking about that. We need to get togetherness between the sort of fans, players, etc. Be a massive result if we can get it.
This is the thing. I mean, Thistle have only lost 4 games all season. 4-week games. You know, they are a very, very good side. They've just... And I think they've just been very impressive. Because, again, as you say, you know, they signed Alex Samuel, and if we'd signed them, nobody would have been, you know, getting the bunting out. And I think when you look at their squad kind of man for man at the start of the season, I think anybody was going, you know, Thistle are going to be right up there. They've been very, very good. Like Mark Wilson deserves a huge amount of credit for what he's done. But by that same token, and again, this is not me getting ahead of myself by any means at all, but with the injuries that they've got and the fact that Josh Clark is missing from international duty, like this might be the best time to play them. Doesn't guarantee anything at all. But again, like all of a sudden, having been very, very negative and very devoid of optimism 48 hours ago, now, all of a sudden, you get a good result against Airdrie, and then you look at the next game and go, right, who is it? Because we're going to go and take a game of them. So I think, had we lost to Airdrie, I would have been incredibly negative about this one. And all of a sudden, and it's not just pure football supporters' blind faith. All of a sudden, you look at that and you're going, well, there's no reason why we can't go and get a result there. Les, in terms of this one, you would have to assume at this point, based on what we know, that Lewis Vaughan will miss out. Is Kai Montagu guaranteed a start in his place?
I think you've got to give him the start. And I mean, the thing is that the win against Airdrie, to an extent, changes the dynamic of this one, because it's not a free hit by any means. It's not like a game where we can rest everybody and just play kids and see what happens. But it's also not a must win at all costs for us. It's a game where we've got a good chance. We need to be competitive, but we can be sensible about it. And I think that weirdly enough, I'm minded of the 0-0 at Firhill just before Christmas, which was a similar kind of, and I suspect Dougie Emery will probably approach this one in the same way. That you think a draw would actually be a really good result, because that would put us 6 points above the relegation spots with a significantly better goal difference than the two teams below us. But Thistle have got to win. If they want to keep the pressure up in St Johnstone, in fact, if they want to keep the clear air to Arbroath as well behind them, they've got to win this. And they'll know that, and they're gonna have to go for it. They've got good players who can hurt you. They're second in the league for a reason, but they are going to have to go for it, and that means that hopefully there will be chances for us as well. They can't, even at 1-0, they can't just sit in. There will be, hopefully, opportunities will open up, space will open up, and that's where the pace and energy of somebody like Kai Montagu could be really useful. I think I would effectively keep the same starting 11 that we had for Airdrie. It would be, and that includes Winter as well, just to be very clear. I think it would be very, very harsh to drop him. Unless somebody's carrying a knock, I wouldn't risk anybody who's having to play through a pain barrier or anything. I certainly wouldn't risk somebody like Lewis Vaughan unless whatever it is miraculously passes. But as far as possible, I would just follow that same starting 11, and see what transpires from there. Because it's, as I say, it changes the dynamic for us in that we do need to go out, we do need to compete. We are still in a relegation battle, but we don't need to go balls to the wall from minute 0 to get the win.
Yeah,
just one thing as well.
Yeah.
While I'm still venting, I don't want to talk about Ayr too much, but that's going to be because I know we'll talk about that in the post Partick. That's going to be a very interesting game as well, and that can go one of two ways. So Scott Brown apparently had the players in the dressing room till 5:30 or after 5:30. Either on Friday they get a reaction and they click and they pump us. That could happen. Or he's lost the dressing room, he gets desperate, and it goes the other way, and he's sacked. It could go either way. I am absolutely not doing what Wayne did, and I'm absolutely not saying I don't see how we can lose this. I'm saying there is a 50% chance we could lose the Ayr game. I think it goes one way or the other, but I'm just going to get that out there. But the Partick game, I think, is a much more interesting proposition, because, as I say, Partick have got to win, and we've got an opportunity to play into that.
The thing is, obviously, like, nothing's guaranteed. We could quite easily lose both of these games. That's not an unimaginable scenario by any means at all. But if someone was to say to you right now, listen, it's in your hands, but I have to tell you, you get to win one, you have to lose the other one. You'd beat Ayr every day of the week. Like, if you had the choice, you got to win one, lose one. Right, that's fine. Quite happy to lose to Thistle if we beat Ayr on Friday. Like, that would be the way to go. Because, as I say, it's not a free hit by any means at all, but the Thistle game sits outside of the cannibalism of it all. That game doesn't take place in Sonny Bean's cave like the rest of them. And if we do, regardless of what the Thistle result is, if we beat Ayr on Friday, that really drags them back in. And as you say, we'll talk about that more midweek. But I mean, it's not impossible. Listen, Sunday night, we're recording this now. I don't think it will happen, but it's not impossible that Ayr United got in that game with a different manager. It could well be that they're looking at a Monday board meeting or somebody's resignation email is in the inbox at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Like, it's not out with the realms of possibility, but it will be. I think the thing is, this Thistle game, as I say, suddenly becomes another game. Another game where anything can happen. Another game that is a viable chance to go and win 3 points, which if we'd lost to Airdrie, that wouldn't have been the narrative. And as I say, even I think if Thistle were fully equipped with all their players, you're probably still talking about this in the way you would if we were playing St Johnstone.
Yeah.
Where you'd be going, look, they're top of the league for a reason, or at the top of the league for a reason, they're playing well, they're all this kind of stuff. But actually, I think Thistle are, by their own high standards, pretty fragile at the moment. It's a chance to go at them. And the thing we were talking about in the last episode about almost seizing the narrative and doubling down on, like, yeah, we might be terrible away from home. I've tidied up the language there. But, you know, we're actually really good at home. Well, again, you can ride the crest of that wave. Sorry, Robbie, you were going to come in there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, watching the Thistle game down at Capello, the BBC presenters were very keen to emphasise that they, at that point, had not won away on the road since September.
Yeah.
Thistle. So, look, it's a team that have obviously struggled to find wins away from Firhill. So hopefully we can continue that trend and grab the 3 points. It's just nice to come away from a game because fucking hell, it was depressing. Like, fucking hell, lads.
Really glad I went to trouble of tidying up my language 40 seconds ago.
About, like, the whole, like, what's 2 wins on the road, 6 goals, etc. And it's just people doing it to death. And it's just this, like, negative spiral. It's all true, and don't get me wrong, there's been a lot of criticism for the performances. It's just it's a tough read when you're viewing your online content, and there's a lot of discussion about this. So it's nice to see that win yesterday, to say the least.
I imagine it's also a tough lesson. So hopefully people have enjoyed this one a little bit more as well. Listening to us be slightly more upbeat.
Fingers crossed it's the same later on in the week as well.
Yes, exactly. Because as we've said, it will be a quick turnaround. So you're hearing from us today. We'll be back once Tuesday's gone with all the reaction, and then it'll be another preview before Friday. So I would imagine, hopefully Wednesday night, but we'll need to see what schedules allow. So as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.